Wet in wet is a fantastic technique if used properly. You can see how you get a lovely diffused effect by putting clear water on and then dropping colours in. And you can leave it like that, or then when it's dry you can add detail. But there are a few pitfalls with wet in wet, and I'd like to discuss those further with you. So these are just a few things that you need to think about that I've learned over the years. If we take the basic colour wheel and we look at colours that are opposite each other, so we've got blue opposite orange, red opposite green, and purple opposite yellow. Now these opposite colours in a wheel are called complementary colours. So I'll just scribble that down there. Now let's just have a look at what happens when we mix these complementary colours together. Now wet in wet, it speaks for itself. You wet the paper with clear water and then you add your paint so that your paint will run. I'm just going to do a little rectangle here, like that. And we'll start off with, I think we'll start off with blue and orange. So you put this lovely orange on. So say you wanted a nice sunset. And now I'm going to add ultramarine, which is a lovely royal blue. Now immediately you can see that that actually doesn't look very royal blue to me. I'll pop a little bit more orange on there, I think. And then I'm just going to give those a little tip and let them run together a little bit. Like that. And you'll see that you've got some rather strange greys. That's not quite what we were thinking would happen. So let's just have a look at another pair of complementaries. And this time I'm going to use yellow and purple. So say for example you want to do a painting, a lovely spring painting of daffodils and crocuses with lovely fresh colours. Let's see what happens. Put the yellow on first. And then I'm going to add some purple. Right, so you can see once again that that's not quite what you'd expect. Let's put a bit more yellow on. They're not exactly clean colours. Let's run them together. I think you'd be a bit disappointed when you saw all these greys on a lovely spring picture. And then the final pair, which is red and green, let's see what happens then. So I'm doing exactly the same. I'm wetting a patch. And then I'm going to add some green. And let them run. And then put some red over the top. Once again, that red doesn't really look very clean. And it looks quite muddy. And you've got weird browns and greys. And this is because complementary colours will give you what they call a neutral. So that will be a grey or a brown. So it's better to stick to colours that are next to one another on a colour wheel. So let's just have a look at this. I'm going to use two cool colours which lie on the same side of the colour wheel. And you'll see that the colours will remain much cleaner. Now sometimes you want some beautiful greys, that's fine, if you have that knowledge and you know that's what's going to happen. But on other occasions it can be a bit of a shock. So that's a much nicer combination. Another pitfall, well, one is if you don't cover your paper properly and you leave a little space, a little dry bit. But also, say for example, I wanted to create a blue sky with some very dark, thick, stormy clouds that are rolling in. So I've got my blue and I've mixed some grey, and I'm going to mix those together like that. Now you can see that little dry patch. So if you don't cover your paper properly, your paint will never cover it. So that's another thing to think about. So I've mixed my grey and I want some really dark, stormy clouds. Well, it's not a bad grey, but I wouldn't exactly say that they were stormy clouds. That grey is mixing with the blue and just creating a new shade. And there's not an awful lot of impact there. And that's because it's better for the shadow colours and the shaded areas to be thicker. So let's just redo that. Let's just say I'm painting a sea and I want some big waves crashing into the shore. So I've got my blue sea and I'm leaving little white bits for the surf. But this time I'm mixing the shadow colour more like single cream, much thicker. And you'll be able to see in a minute that it will have more impact. So I'm going to put that on now. Here we go. So it still spreads, but it doesn't spread as much. It sort of sits where you put it. It diffuses a little bit, but it doesn't spread too much. And because it's thicker, it looks darker and it has more impact. I'm going to add a little bit more, I think. As long as it's wet, you can always apply more. This could actually be a landscape as well. So let's just put a little bit of land here and pretend that they're clouds. And actually I've got a really happy accident happening there on the left-hand side of that headland where the water's bled and they look like trees. And the paint's just bled up into the water there. And then add a little bit of sea, a bit of water. And you can immediately see that that creates a much better picture. It has more impact with it being thicker. Another thing that people do a lot of is not to wet the paper enough. And it's just damp. So I'm just going to show you that. I'm going to put some water on and I'm going to take some water off. I'll just take a little bit off here. And then I'm going to put some blue on and you think, oh yeah, that's okay, that's diffusing nicely. But when you tip it to make it run, it doesn't run. It just sits there. And that wouldn't make a pleasing sky, for example. Might not be too bad in the sea, because they could be waves. So think about the purpose. So this time, let's make it wetter. And I usually say to my students, it's better for it to be too wet than not wet enough. I'm going to put plenty of water on this time, so bear with me. Put my blue on. And you can see immediately how that's running. And that's great because they diffuse better together, colours mix together nicely. But also, if it's a huge piece of paper, it gives you more time to get your paint on. And it's still plenty wet enough. It's not drying. I'm going to tip that around a wee bit. You can see that it's still running. And that's a much more pleasing effect. And another little thing is don't be tempted to go back onto something when it's not quite dry, because look what happens here. You think, oh, I'll just put a bit more blue in here. No, you don't. You just create a mess, as you can see. So don't fiddle. Don't be tempted to go back. So there you have it. There are just a few pitfalls that I've come up against over the years. Be careful about your complementaries, be careful about the strength of the paint, and be careful about how wet your paper is. On this painting I had to be careful here with the purple and the gold so that I wouldn't get lots of greys. I had to make my colours darker here to make the waves have more impact. Same here, I had to make this colour really thick to make this stormy sky look stormy, and the same with these rocks here. So if you like what you've seen, then I do run an online course. I've mentioned this before, and it's on my website on the teaching tab. So perhaps have a look at that. But if not, then happy painting, and I hope you have fun, and I'll see you next time.